Alright, what we're going to do today is check the valve lash for the cams. These are bucket over valve spring, and then they have the shims like I've shown in previous videos. So I've researched a couple of different ways on how to do it, and also a couple different specifications. So the manual says that the spec is 13 to 16 thousandths, and it has the procedure on how you do it there. So these are not stock cams, these are 264 cams. I looked at another site that had a spec of, I think it was 10 to 12. So, and that spec was for the 264 cams. So we're going to shoot for 10 to 12. I've already checked a couple of them, and they're not even 10 to 12. What I did is I set the engine at top dead center on number 1. So I have the intake and exhaust cam lobes pointing away from each other. That's how I took the first measurement. And I think they were all like between 8 and 9 thousandths. So I'm going to spin the engine around so that my lobes are pointed upward, like how they are here on the intake for number 2. And I'm going to see if it's any different, and basically go from there. Alright, so I have the 10 thousandths feeler gauge right here, and with how I have the cams currently, I'll take this feeler gauge and stick it in between the cam lobe and the bucket, and that one is good at 10 thousandths. So if I pull out the 11 thousandths, check it again. Too tight. So this first one on the exhaust cam is coming in at 10 thousandths. So I've got 12, 10. So I've got 8, 9, and 10 out here now. And I think this one was coming in at 8. So we're good there at 8. We're still good at 9. We're actually still good at 10 on that one. So again, I'll pull out my 11. We're still good at 11. We'll check 12. So it is a little rough at 12. Alright, so 10 thousandths, 11 thousandths, that's on cylinder number 1 of the exhaust. We'll do the same for the others. Start at 10 on the intake. Ten is too tight there. 10 is too tight there. Try 9. So 9 is good on the second lobe for the intake. And actually, I think 8 is too tight, even. So we'll try 7. So 7 is good. Well, 7 is not good, but you know what I mean. So we have 10, 11, 9, I think, and 8. But that's why you got to write them down. So the rest of them I'm going to check, and we'll report back. Alright, and just to show you all how I'm keeping track of what my measurements are, I've written it down on a list here, and this will be so that I know basically what all my measurements were. And once I've got all my measurements done, I'm going to have to get the shims out that are out of spec. I'm going to measure their thickness. I'm going to write that down. There's a conversion that you can do that you can basically determine the thickness of the ones that you need to be within spec, and it's covered in the manual. So we'll continue on. Okay, so sideways view here, but one thing I wanted to point out was that I checked the 2 exhaust lobes for cylinder number 2 with the cam lobes pointed up, and they were both coming in at 16 thousandths, which is top of the cold spec on the stock cams. So I came over here to the intake, the first intake lobe on number 4. That one was reading at 7 thousandths with the cam lobe facing outward. So I spun it enough to get it to where it was pointing upwards, just to double check it, and it was still reading at 7 thousandths. So definitely out of spec. And I don't think it matters if I have the cam lobe pointing outward or pointing upward. I'm still going to get an accurate check. Now I will double check that when I get cylinder number 2 here to where the cam lobes are facing outward, and I'll double check my spec just to make sure. I've got all my measurements except for one, which is the intake valve on the first one on cylinder number 2 on the intake side, and the gap is so tight that I can't even get my smallest feeler gauge in there. 0.0025. That is way too tight, and for sure will cause a bad day. So got all my measurements, and now's the fun part. Alright everyone, it's been a couple of days. I got the tools that I needed to properly do some valve adjustment. So at this point I have checked all my valve lash, written everything down. I know what needs to be adjusted, and I have already adjusted a few, just trying to figure out how to get the tool, how to use the tool. So I'm going to go on ahead and show you guys how I am using the tools. I can't say for sure that it's the correct way, but it's the way that I have found works. So I'll show you that, and I'll show you the process of what I'm doing to figure out what replacement shim that I need to put in the buckets to make sure that my valve lash is all good. So let's jump into it. Alright, so according to our measurements previously, the exhaust on cylinder number 2, both of these were coming in at 16 thousandths. I have already adjusted number 2 over here. I got it as close as I could with the shims that I had, so I'm probably gonna run into the same problem on this one over here. So after I put in the new shim on this side over here, I double checked the gap and it was 0.009, which is still below the 10 to 12 spec that I'm shooting for. But as we go through this process, I might come up with some better shims, or I may just have to order some. But anyway, what we are doing here, and I hope the picture's coming in alright. So I've moved the little notch here right into the middle, and I'm going to take my pliers and I'm going to compress the bucket down. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to take that light away, but hopefully this comes out okay for you guys. Now you want to make sure that your tool is away from the cam lobe. You can't see just because of the angle of the camera, but I can see. And then you just twist it like that. Grab my flashlight here, and you guys can see that the valve is going down. So I have it down. Right. Now I'll take my tool here, and you want to stick it in this side down as opposed to this side. And I know this angle just really sucks, but I'm going to go from the back of the cam right up against the lip of the bucket, and I have my tool in there. Okay. Yeah, let's see here. Alright. So it's in there. So hopefully this is a better angle. And ideally what you're gonna want to have is the tool right along the edge of the bucket, and if you can still spin the shim around, then you know you're good. I can't quite spin the shim around, but we're gonna try it. So what I'm gonna do next is take my pick here, and I'm going to pry the shim out. I'm going to pop it loose so that I can pull it out. Now, one thing that you're going to have to watch for is, if you're going to use the method the way I did, you're going to have to make sure that you put your tool far back enough that when you do pop the shim loose, you can still grab onto it with a magnet and pull it out. So hopefully we're there. If not, we'll reset. Yep. We're not quite there. Okay, we should be there now. Alright, and I got it popped loose. We just come in here with our magnet, and it comes out. And it is out. And you have to be really careful about where you place your tool, so that, because if you place it right in the middle, when you go to try to pull your shim out, it's going to get stuck, and you won't be able to get it out. I found that out already. But anyway, we have the shim out, and the next part is we'll measure it, do our math equation, and figure out what thickness we need going forward. So I have my micrometer here, and I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to zero it. Okay. And how I check these is, hopefully you guys can see that okay. Yeah. Just like that. And I'll spin it around a couple of times just to get consistent readings. So we have 0.830. Okay, yes. 0.830. So 0.830 is what we have measured. And when we look at the manual here, the conversion that we're going to use is this one right here. So M would be the measured valve clearance. Hopefully you guys can see that alright. So the measured valve clearance for this one was 0.016. And we're going to take that minus, I'm working in inches, so I'm going to do minus 0.0146, and then we're going to add that to thickness of the removed shim. 0.16 minus 0.0146 equals 0.0014 plus the thickness that we measured, which was 0.0830. So this is the size of the shim, or the thickness of the shim that we need. Now unfortunately I don't have one because I just used the one that was closest to it. But we'll find one that at least maybe gets us close. Alright, and we've found a shim that's as close as we're going to get for now. And it's going to make the gap smaller than I want it to, but that's fine. At least for now, because I might be able to sacrifice some from the other engine. But basically, they should just sit right back in there. And then you take your tool. Again, be very careful that you do not hit the cam lobe. Depress it just enough to get your tool out. There you go. So that was a quick demonstration on how I am using the valve lash adjustment tools. I don't know if that's the correct way to do it, but again, that's the way that worked for me. And hopefully if you guys run into anything like that, you know, hopefully that method works for you also. If you have a better method, let me know. Anyway, I'm going to check the rest of these. I don't think I'm going to film it just because, you know, it'd be a time lapse. Maybe I'll do that, I don't know. Alright, that is where we're going to end today's video, primarily because the camera's dying and also because I want to go on ahead and get finished up here. Hopefully that was helpful for you guys. First time I've ever done it, so I'm sure there's a couple of things I didn't do right, but anyway, thanks for watching. More videos coming. As soon as I get all this valve clearance crap out of the way, this engine's ready to go in the car, which means I got to pull the other engine out of the car, and you know, all that fun stuff. We're getting close. I've got 29 days to get this car ready for a drift event. Fun times. Road Warrior 72 out.